we are waiting right now to hear if Pete Alonzo is actually going to sign with Toronto, if he's actually going to be a Blue Jay, if he's actually going to go up to Canada, which I don't think anybody had on the roadmap here. I don't think anybody was thinking that he would be joining Vladdy as much as we've heard about Vladdy. So we're keeping an ear to the streets for that. I'm on Twitter checking for that. I just heard Loogie as well talking about that. If that news breaks, Pat Ragazzo will join me. We will talk all around Pete Alonzo, the Mets, the Blue Jays, the offseason, baseball, Jurickson Profar, as you just heard in the update, signs with the Braves. So the Braves get better in the division. The Dodgers get better in the league. And I think that the Mets have to make some other moves. I don't think that it's just as simple as, hey, this is the number that we have for Pete Alonzo. I'm very interested to see what the numbers actually will be. I'm very interested to see if, Toronto gives him more money than the Mets, or if he just leaves for the sake of leaving, burning a bridge. Enough is enough, too much pride, and he wants to be done. 888-808-1019. I'm going to say the number a bunch of times because I'm a solo host, and I want to connect with you, the fans that listen to The Fan, and want to get your point across. Call up with a take. Call up with a thought. Call up with something that maybe we haven't heard yet today. I was listening to Evan and Tiki, and, people call with a couple different interesting spins on things. Like I heard a caller suggest that Pete Alonzo is going to go to Toronto and become best friends with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and convince him not to sign with the Mets. I don't suspect that that's possible or that's going to happen. But, yeah, that was an interesting one. So dial the number and join me. And I think it's a big Mets and Jets fan night. It feels like that at least because obviously we're welcoming in Aaron Glenn and we're waiting on potentially the departure of a lot of people's favorite Met, a guy that you had plans on being a forever Met. And, this could be a news-breaking night, a night in Mets history and New York baseball history that we remember. And with Aaron Glenn, history has been made as well. I'm extremely happy for that guy because I've been following that guy for years now. He popped back on my radar a few years back when the Detroit Lions had Hard Knocks. And 2 years ago, he was on the Pivot podcast. I've been mentioning this all week, and I've heard callers mention it, and I've seen a lot of people online bring it up. And, I had a tweet where I just simply wrote, Aaron Glenn is not Rob Saleh, and I posted the clip of him talking about being a restaurant owner, right? I love that about the guy. Frenchies, he said he had 8 restaurants called Frenchies, and he had one right across the street from NRG Stadium in Houston, Texas. And I like that he was a businessman. I like that he was a boss. He has a CEO mindset. I like that I've used the parallel a bunch about teams being like restaurants, franchises. We say the metaphor all the time, the fish stinks from the head down. Well, I always point to a bad restaurant. If the service is poor, if the food isn't cooked right, I want to speak to the manager. I want to speak to the owner. I want to speak to the guy that is running everything and letting this go on because it starts with that person. And I feel like Aaron Glenn is going to come in with not just his experience in the NFL as a player, specifically here with the Jets, knowing what it's like to be a first-round pick for the New York Jets, go 1-15, but also have some success. His experience as a scout, getting it out the mud, starting the hard way, saying, I don't want any favors done. Don't treat me any differently, right? I'm going to start as a scout. I'm going to do quality control. I'm going to be a positions coach. I'm going to be a defensive coordinator. And I'll pause on the defensive coordinator thing because so much of the conversation is same old Jets. Wrong. So much of the conversation this week is what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Stop yourself. This is not the same. I know it's easy to lump it in and say it's the same, but there are so many things that are different here. And this is a time to celebrate, right? This isn't a time to be comparing, but if you want to compare them, don't compare them to Rob Saleh or Todd Bowles or Rex Ryan, other defensive coordinators that have come here with the Jets and not necessarily, I don't want to lump Rex Ryan in there, but, haven't got the success that they were supposed to be hyped up to bring. I was thinking today, and I'm like, what can we compare the hiring of Aaron Glenn to more recently, and not with the Jets? And then it clicked. As this is a Mets and Jets night, as I said, the fans have dual citizenship in Queens and East Rutherford. I'm like, oh, this is similar to Carlos Mendoza, right? You had no idea what Carlos Mendoza was going to be like, what he was going to do. For my money, he should have been manager of the year. And when you go back to November of last year, Carlos Mendoza, you can compare him to Aaron Glenn. Carlos Mendoza was a first-time manager. Was he a former Met? No, he wasn't a former Met, but he was a New Yorker. He had been here in New York with the New York Yankees in this market, a bench coach with the Yankees where, I mean, the Mets have tried that formula a bunch. If they played for the Yankees, they're with the Yankees, come across town to us, it works. So I look at Carlos Mendoza and compare him to Aaron Glenn, and I go back to the tweet that the Mets put out November 13th, 2023. First tweet that comes up because I follow him on Twitter. Ross in Bergen County says, God damn it. And then there's a bunch of tweets with laughing emojis. There's people underestimating what this guy is going to be. Some people with optimism, please be the one. Some positive, some negative, as what we're getting with Aaron Glenn here. 888-808-1019. You know, you're going to be a little bit skeptical because you're scarred from the past. You have PTSD because you don't even want to believe. It's easier to believe that the Jets are going to be miserable, that they made a mistake again. But when I look at what Carlos Mendoza was able to do his first year on the job, of course there was a learning curve. I mean, look at everything he had to deal with. A terrible start. He had to talk to the media every night and stay positive, stay even-keeled. That's what I loved about Carlos Mendoza. This guy's not showing you anything. He's not showing you that they're struggling. Clearly, he has the respect of the locker room, and I think Aaron Glenn will have that as well. I think he's going to be even-keeled as well. People are going to ask him about the 14 losing streak seasons and the playoff losing streak, not making the playoffs, and it's got nothing to do with him, but I think he's going to handle it the right way. It's funny. I hear all this talk about Pete Carroll, and I made a parallel with Pete Carroll, too. I'm like, oh, everybody wants Pete Carroll, the old man that has done it before, has coached before, tried and true. That's Buck Showalter. They could have stayed with Buck Showalter. They could have played it safe. No, they went in a different direction. They weren't afraid to go in a different direction, bring some new blood, some new energy in. And also, you know, I keep hearing the new young coach. Aaron Glenn is not young. I mean, he's also not old. He might be new on the job, but he's 52. He's bringing a ton of experience with him. He's not a 38-year-old Ben Johnson. He's 52 years of age. And I think with this 5-year deal, he's focused on winning right away in the 5 years. This isn't a rebuild. They have a ton of talent. I can't wait to see what he does with Sauce Gardner, right? I can't wait to see what he does with a kid from Detroit after being in Detroit, a kid that was drafted in the first round as a corner, same as him. Like other guys, I don't know, Michael Clemens went to Texas A&M. I can't wait to see what he does with Garrett Wilson. And, you know, sticking with the comparison of Mendoza and Buck Showalter to Pete Carroll, around here, everybody was saying they had to go get Craig Counsell, right? Also had a new GM in David Stearns we weren't sure about, but I think everybody thought highly of him. And put a pin in that. I'll get to the GM hiring with the Jets in a second, but it was Craig Counsell. Talked to Steve Cohen, talked to the Mets, ended up going to the Cubs. Craig Counsell was another guy that was like currently active and trying to make a lateral move. That's like Mike McCarthy. Oh, why not talk to Mike McCarthy? Because they want to start fresh. They want a new face. They don't want to just, let's go with the same guy that the Cowboys just fired, that Green Bay fired, his third stint here. They have their guy. It's a homecoming. Let's celebrate Aaron Glenn. Let's prop him up. Let's compare him to Dan Campbell before we compare him to the Jets coaches that have failed. He played at Texas A&M with Dan Campbell. He's been there through the whole Dan Campbell era. He knows what Dan Campbell did to bring the Detroit Lions from the depths to being a contender now. And I keep also hearing this. He's not even as good of a defensive coordinator as Rob Saleh was with the Niners. Come on. Look at the roster that Rob Saleh had. Look at the division they played in. And please don't cherry pick this last game against the Commanders. They were not facing Sam Howell and Ron Rivera's Commanders. The Commanders are good. They have a ton of talent. They have a new vibe from head to toe. New owner, GM, head coach, quarterback, logo, name. They're different. Jared Goff turned the ball over 4 times. He had 3 interceptions and 1 fumble. I don't care who's calling the defense. I don't care if it's the Steel Curtain. I don't care if it's the Ravens. I don't care if it's the 85 Bears. Nobody's going to win in the NFL when you have a quarterback turn the ball over that much, get concussed, get knocked out of the game. Also, please remember the 10 different injuries and then even Amik Robertson getting hurt in that game. So what I'm saying is I'm hearing so much about this last game last week, his last game as a defensive coordinator with the Lions. And you can cherry pick that. But there's, a lot of different things. The devil is in the details. 888-808-1019. He's not going to be a defensive coordinator here. He's going to hire a defensive coordinator. He's going to be a CEO, a boss, a leader of men. He's going to check in with the defense. He's going to check in with the offense and the special teams. He's going to check in with the kitchen people. He's going to check in with the people that do the, physical therapy, rehab, the trainers. He's going to check in with the strength and conditioning guys. I cannot wait to see his press conference. I'm not going to say what this guy isn't going to be. I'm not going to lump him in the rest. I'm going to give him the opportunity and the chance to succeed here with the Jets and potentially be the change, like Carlos Mendoza was. 888-808-1019. Keith McPherson on the Fan. I'm going to take a break. In about 2 hours, Zach Rosenblatt will join us from The Athletic, specifically to talk more about the Jets, Aaron Glenn. And what I want to leave you with before we break, and as we're also waiting on the Pete Alonzo news to break, and Pat Ragonzo will join me whenever that goes on, I was just cracking up at the news that came out of the NFL on my way in. So much so that I'm pulling my car over in the front to tweet and to put it in my notes. So if you've been listening to my show late at night, and maybe you haven't because you go to sleep and that's fine, I've been on Shad Khan and the Jaguars. I mean, I've been on them the whole way with the Jets because in the last 10 years, they're the worst team in the NFL. The Jets are right next to them. But Shad Khan kind of speaks about the Jets and does things where I think he thinks he's better than the Jets. He opened his mouth about Aaron Rodgers, right? In regards to Trevor Lawrence not having a say. Oh, this isn't an Aaron Rodgers Jets type of situation. No, Trevor Lawrence will not have a say in the head coach, in the GM search. But a couple weeks ago, there was a Zoom call where Shad Khan, the owner of the Jaguars, said he wouldn't rule out firing GM Trent Baalke while they both were on the call. While media members were on the call, this hit news. He literally said he wouldn't rule it out while this man is sitting on camera. He said he'll get rid of the GM if a prospective head coach gives Khan a credible reason. And that he did it today. He absolutely backed up his words today. I was talking last night about Liam Cohen. I said, what's going on there in Jacksonville? As so many people talk about the Jets not being an attractive destination, who would want to take this job? That's another thing that you commend Aaron Glenn for. He wants to be a Jet. He is a Jet. He wanted to come home. But the last couple of nights I was talking about Liam Cohen, and I'm like, all right, Liam Cohen interviewed with them. He had a second interview scheduled, but he took himself out of the running, went back to Tampa Bay, and they supposedly offered him a contract to be the highest paid coordinator in the NFL. That was Adam Schefter reporting that just yesterday. And then more news came out today, right, that Tampa actually hadn't heard from him. And also, I was talking about how Rob Saleh was interviewing with the Jaguars and Patrick Graham was interviewing with the Jaguars, and how obviously they have ties here. Patrick Graham, who's the defensive coordinator with the Giants, 2020, 2021, and then you guys know Rob Saleh. I don't have to tell you, when he was here. So I'm like, okay, they have kind of an ear to the streets with these guys, but Liam Cohen is more of a highly regarded head coaching option, a head coaching hire. Something was funny about it. So then when I got this news, so now Patrick Graham, who was scheduled to interview today, that's done. Rob Saleh, who was scheduled to interview with the Jaguars Friday, that's done. Liam Cohen actually took the job. He reversed course. And I just think it's crazy that we're spending so much time on the Fan talking about how backwards the Jets are by hiring the head coach before the GM. It's a trend in the NFL. We talk about Bill Parcells all the time. Hey, you want me to make the dinner? Well, I got to buy the groceries. We talk about Bill Belichick being the most successful coach all time. What did Bill do? Bill was his own GM. It is a trend in the NFL, and specifically here with Aaron Glenn, you're going to need Aaron Glenn to have a say in the type of players that he brings in to change this thing. I talked about Brad Holmes, the GM from the Lions a couple weeks ago, how he hit on so many Pro Bowlers in his picks. And there's a certain DNA, there's a certain quality, there's a certain standard that they're looking for in players. And that is how they were able to change the Detroit Lions. The same thing can happen here. So don't call me tonight and say, oh, well, same old Jets, their ass backwards. They haven't hired a GM yet. They hired the head coach. They got a highly coveted guy that everybody in the league was looking at. Literally, everybody in the league was looking at Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn the last 2 years, knowing that those guys were going to leave. They had unfinished business. They came back. They failed. They were out. But when you see Trent Baalke fired today and Shad Khan said that he would if a candidate gave him a good enough reason, Liam Cohen gave him a good enough reason, and he did that. 888-808-1019. So what I'm saying is these head coaches have to have a say in the guys that are drafting and trading and picking the personnel. It can't just be, hey, here you go, coach this guy. I traded for him. That's why Jerry Jones is never going to win anything, as he's looking to hire Brian Schottenheimer. I don't even have time for it. Keith McPherson on the Fan, 888-808-1019. We got plenty to unpack. I'm waiting on the NBA All-Star voting and the starters to come out. Knicks fans obviously going to be paying attention to that. There is the NFL Honors Awards to talk about. Obviously, there's stuff to talk about with the draft and, just general NFL news. Mark Andrews speaks, and obviously we're waiting as well for Pete Alonzo to know if he's going to join the Toronto Blue Jays frauds up there in Canada. All right, let's break it down. You guys know the number to dial. I'm still going to say it a bunch of times because that's the whole point of the game. KM to AM returns right after this.